Hello and welcome to A Place We Call Home, a conversation on the legacy of home in a changing city. We've invited panelists to discuss their work and highlight themes explored in the films Philly Home Movie, Housing as a Road to Healthcare, Norris Square, and From the Dell to the L. They're all featured in the Philadelphia Stories program. I'm Denise James, a journalist, teacher, PhillyCAM board member, and we are going to start this off with a short video highlighting the films that inspired this conversation about our changing city. They are Philadelphia Stories. Here's the clip.
Philadelphia has certainly one of the older histories in America. That's important to me, just sort of having a sense of time. And I slowly started to fall in love with Philadelphia, the really old houses and the community, this real sense of ownership and partnership. I also like the architecture and all the old churches. This free stuff, plus water ice and pretzels.
I can't stand that pretzels are as expensive as they are now either. I mean, come on, it's Dell. Used to be able to get 6 for $1. Wasn't that long ago. I don't care that the guy's hands are dirty, you know? Something that I have love and hate with is being known as the city of the cheesesteak, because, I mean, it's good and everything, don't get me wrong, but, I mean, there's so much more here.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
Sometimes just a lack of green spaces really bothers me about Philly. I wish there were more trees on streets, and especially in my neighborhood, which is more of a industrial, post-industrial neighborhood. I just wish there were more parks and more greenery.
But after the Second World War, like a lot of cities and like a lot of things, I think the parish people started moving out. Levitt's building homes, the suburbs are starting to move up.
When industry started to bottom out and move, textiles went down south or overseas. By the 70s, it was kind of kaput. And so, if you could, I guess you moved. A lot of people couldn't move, and a lot of people didn't want to move.
People moved out. Nobody gave to the collection anymore. Well, sometimes they blame I don't know how you would call it, whether it's some other church or not. Why did they sell? Why didn't they try to keep that as a church? What people didn't realize is if nobody goes there, there's no collection. And they have to get rid of them some way or another, and they'll sell them for anything. They can't afford to keep them. So many schools and churches have been closed for that reason.
I could not move away, or I didn't want to move away, let's say. So we decided to stay and try to do something about it. And a few people stayed and did just that. At that time, quite a few churches got together and we did a vigil. That was in 1985, I remember. And from there on, then, we started the work of, getting together with different communities and organizing the community. Little by little, it didn't happen overnight, but little bit at a time, the park was cleaned and families were able to use the park again.
Well, it was sort of horror being out for 13 months in the streets. I was wishing for a bed every night and shower. We got cleaned in the ladies' room downstairs and all. Now show them where I slept once upon a time.
When I think of the issue of housing, to me, it's really about a right to housing, and people should have a home to live in. But what became also very apparent is that housing itself also functions really as a health intervention and helps people maintain their health a lot better.
Now I have a nice apartment. I would say I'm doing the right things. I manage my medications. I take my medications every day. I go to all my doctor's appointments. And I really take the initiative to do things today for myself.
Now I have a place through Pathways to Housing.
You are listening to WPPM 106.5 FM, PhillyCAM Radio, and watching PhillyCAM TV. This panel discussion is part of PhillyCAM's Philadelphia Stories 20th Anniversary Retrospective. Philadelphia Stories was a program that chronicled our city's rich cultural fabric and imagined futures through the eyes of independent filmmakers and community storytellers. It introduced all genres of filmmaking and gave many filmmakers their first broadcast premiere. Now, we've assembled a group of Philadelphia-based advocates whose community-rooted work is centered on housing and tenants' rights, just development, and cultural preservation to imagine a city whose residents directly shape how neighborhoods and the places we call home evolve. Let me introduce you to our panelists. Karen Harvey is a retired social worker, having served in both clinical and administrative capacities in the behavioral healthcare arena for 35 years. After being affected by an attempted mass eviction of a 200-unit building in 2017, she became aware of and joined the Philadelphia Tenants Unit. The PTU is currently active or advocating for greater protections through the Good Cause 2.0 bill, which has been an uphill fight with council members and HAPCO, but she has sworn to see it through to fruition. Our second panelist, Cheri Honkala, is a formerly homeless mother and founder and leader of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, and before that, the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. She gained fame when she was a homeless mother, breaking into abandoned government-owned houses and occupying them in order to survive. Cheri is a founding general in the Poor People's Army and an elder advisor to the Second Rainbow Coalition. Andrew Spiers currently serves as the Director of Training and Technical Assistance for Pathways to Housing PA's training and educational initiative, Housing First University, where he helps social service agencies and communities to end homelessness through the use of the Housing First model, harm reduction, and other evidence-based practices. And our other panelist is Reverend Adan Mairena, who was born in Central America and raised in Chicago, Texas, and New Mexico. Adan is a graduate of the University of New Mexico and Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Adan moved to Pennsylvania in 2003 to serve as a Lilly resident in the ministry at Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church. He was then called by the Presbytery of Philadelphia to be the organizing pastor of the West Kensington Ministry. Let me thank you all for joining us today and lending your voice and your vision to this very important conversation. Thank you all. Let's start with Andrew. Let's look at pathways to housing. Is housing still a pathway to health?
Oh, absolutely. I really loved watching, and it's not featured in that clip, but there are other participants that were in that original film who are still with us today, and seeing the ways that they've grown and improved their physical health, mental health, involvement in the community has been really, really rewarding to watch. Using the Housing First model, most programs see about 85 to 90% housing retention after 5 years. And typically the participants in a high fidelity housing first program are folks who wouldn't have qualified for other programs because of substance use disorders, because of unmanaged psychiatric disabilities. But we know that once we get someone into a home and surround them with the support services that they need to be successful, we see the prevention of new illnesses or injuries. We see lifestyle behavior changes that promote good health. And we know that we can increase folks' access to high quality healthcare and other social services that people really need. So we see an absolute decrease in inpatient hospitalizations and a lot of folks involved in our services. We're housing over 550 participants now in Philadelphia, and a very good majority of them are accessing health services through our on-site our on-site integrated care clinic, which is a partnership with Project Home.
I would imagine, just as a follow-up, that there is a cycle of, if housing helps is a road to better health, is better health also a road to being able to maintain what you need to maintain in your life to continue having housing, to maintain your housing.
Yeah, especially when we think about behavioral health considerations, right? I think there are still some misconceptions about the housing first model as housing only, right? We just stick somebody in an apartment and then, leave them to do whatever they will, right? But it's we find that a good majority of our folks have goals about accessing behavioral health supports that help them better manage as a tenant, right? Better manage relationships in the community, getting involved. One of the key principles of Housing First is community inclusion and making sure that folks are a part of the communities that they're living in, that they have opportunities for vocational, recreational activities, and really looking at health holistically in all of the ways that we can kind of get folks plugged in to have meaningful interactions with folks in their communities, in their lives, in their city.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. Don, Norris Square featured the community that you are rooted in. What resonated with you about that film, and what do you see the role of the church being today when we talk about building strong communities and rebuilding communities?
Well, the West Kensington Ministry was formerly the Norris Square Presbyterian Church. So my predecessor was on there, as was Edie's Brown and Tomasita, and those are just pillars in the community. And Pat DiCarlo, who's still here. Cheri lived on the square too for many years, and we were friends from when I got here 20 years ago. So she can also talk about North Square. But I see the church continue to be a gathering space. St. Boniface was torn down like about 10 years ago, and that was another historic church on the square. We're still doing a lot of the same thing with youth. We do food. We are a safe haven. We're a gathering space. We're very community focused. A lot of groups use our space, so I see the space as an asset to have people use it. We've held a woman in sanctuary for 60 days through the new sanctuary movement. We do voting. So the space is an asset, various programs. Since then, we've built a recording studio named after Reverend Gage, the Gage Recording Studio, and we have a silkscreen studio. And so we do a lot. I think, especially now, since the neighborhood there's just like massive, rapid development going on. A lot of people are being displaced. A lot of the residents that can't afford to stay here anymore are having to move. There are a number of Latinos who still make enough money that are going to remain here. The park is going through a redesign. Ground was broken just a couple days ago, so the park is going to look very different. But yet, the colors and the style is going to remain culturally relevant. So we hired a firm from New York that has designed parks in Puerto Rico and other Latin American places so the park is still going to remain culturally relevant to the Latino community, Caribbean community. I see the church to be again, a safe haven, to be relevant, especially to be relevant in what our community is going through, especially those who are hungry and suffering, and to be a prophetic voice. You know, in the biblical Judeo-Christian tradition, you know, we follow a person who spoke truth to power and who was relevant to the issues that affected everyday people. So as long as you know, our church, as long as I'm here, will be a place where voices are heard, where we speak about justice and act upon it, from issues from gun violence to hunger to voting rights to food insecurity to housing, whatever our community is suffering, that's where we have to be. And also, you know, deal with those tough issues of community police relationships, of gentrification, trying to be a place where different voices that don't agree, minds that don't agree, hopefully can get together and speak. So, I mean, I can go on forever, but hopefully that's.
Well, yes. As you talk about the role of the church, I'm wondering, what is it about the speaking truth to power, the having a prophetic voice, to having a safe haven space and providing things that people need in communities? What is it about that helps a community, a group of people who live in the same area, be a community?
Well, I mean, again, Cheri's on here, and she has fought many more battles than I have. But what I have seen is that when a community can gather around the issues that affect them without the organizations or the individuals personally benefiting monetarily, you can rally around issues around housing, hunger, violence, whatever it is.
Yeah.
When organizations and individuals and residents can gather around those issues, then there can be change. But yet, I think that's the uphill struggle, where personalities, motives, agendas trump the mission. But yet, when like, you know, in the film of North Square, The Roots of a Community, you had the church together, you had the community alliance, or it used to be the civic association together. You had various people together to try to take care of the park. And look what happened. Like, I benefited from that.
Yeah.
I benefited from those people uniting. And that's tough. Like, as I said, we redesigned the park, and that was beautiful to be a part of that. You know, it's the Friends of North Square Park. Lots of different people, different organizations gathered together to address our park. And who wouldn't want to rally around a park, right? So that's my answer to that.
Having that common
thing,
struggle seems to be part of it, and then hopefully common successes and victories along the way.
Yeah. But as importantly is like agreeing that it's not about your organization or who's going to get what grant or how you personally benefit, and sharing the leadership role, because you know, when you have you know that saying, too many chefs in the kitchen. You know, and that's also like when things go kind of downhill, where it's people that are getting paid to be executive directors or whatever. I think part of what we, and I include myself, sometimes what we fail in is developing the leadership from the grassroots level and having them lead, having them be the person that is the face and the voice, as opposed to us having to be in the spotlight. You know what I mean?
Understood. That's certainly a takeaway for other spiritual organizations that are doing work in community. Thank you for that. Now, Cheri, you're still working to keep people in homes and to get them into homes. How has the work changed over the years? It's been a while since you've been someone who's had to fight for yourself and your family while also fighting for others in this situation. How's the work going?
Well, yes and no. I actually, in the last couple months, have had 6 really close, 3 of them family members pass away. And so that has also been very challenging, and it's connected to the housing issue. It's connected to the opiate crisis. That's a whole nother ball game, but I want to lift up Nadira Hood, Jennifer, who was responsible for a lot of good organizing on the Parkway. I just feel like it's important to say that.
Yes.
Who recently also passed away from COVID. We've never marched. I mean, we've never missed a beat. And I've learned a lot in my journey and my experience as a formerly homeless mother and as an organizer. And I learned over time that first you start off as a homeless mother, and then if you are articulate and you can speak, then you become an activist. And somehow or another, your experience is not the same anymore. Which is, actually that wisdom is incredibly important to, lend to the process. And I got started in this process by, taking over abandoned houses because I was currently homeless and didn't want to freeze to death with my older son. And here it is all these years later. And now we've taken over the largest amount of housing that we've ever taken in Philadelphia. Nobody knows about it. We get no press coverage. We are in over 50 abandoned properties that we've taken over. We're part of a federal lawsuit trying to make housing a human right. And we also are flying and consulting people across the entire country, in Alabama, Chicago, California, you name it, that are currently engaged in housing takeovers as well. Because in all years that I've been fighting for decent, accessible, affordable housing, this is the worst that it's ever been. And many of the large agencies have referred people to us. People with the largest disability organizations are now referring people to us. The Red Cross, we've had somebody that at the height of COVID, the grandmother, the mother, and the children were in one of the city's hotels, and then they had a time limit, so they kicked them out. And they were in a hotel in the first place because their house had burned to the ground during COVID. So the city of Philadelphia put them up for about 2 weeks at the Holiday Inn on Delaware Boulevard, on Columbus Boulevard. And then the family called us crying. And we've had them in one of our takeover houses since the beginning of this. And the Biden administration announced that they wanted to make housing a human right. And at the same time that they announced that, with the new Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, they issued eviction orders for many of our families on the very same day. But we have not moved the families. The families are still waiting to see if the authorities come. And every day that goes by, we're building this underground railroad and taking more and more properties and housing more and more families strictly out of necessity.
You mentioned that you have done some of your largest housing takeovers and not gotten media attention. Is media attention something you wanted for these? And could you talk a little bit about that largest home takeover or housing takeover?
Yeah, this is the largest amount of properties that we've ever taken over at any given time. And I think it actually makes sense that we're getting no media coverage because we know, unlike PhillyCAM, many major media outlets are embedded with, like the city's administration or, other politics, other political alignments. And so they can't have a city, that supposedly address the housing issue after the Parkway, talk about the fact that, families are housing themselves in record numbers in Philadelphia. So, yeah, I mean, we've got a problem, and you link that with the opiate crisis simultaneously. My son's father died right before Christmas. He overdosed on heroin. He was a part of the chronic homeless. And if there's anybody that should have gotten access to services and stuff like that, was somebody that I knew personally and struggled. So we know all the dirty secrets around the lack of programs and the lack of help for people that suffer with chronic homelessness in the city of Philadelphia. And he actually ended up overdosing in the Conley house, which is a project home, in his very room. They found him dead right before Christmas.
Wow. I'm very sorry for your loss and the losses of the folks that you mentioned as well, Jennifer included, when you started talking. There is clearly a lot of pain and health issue, as alluded to in the film we initially talked about. Now, Karen, these have been some tough 2 years for a lot of folks. We hear people talking about folks working from home, hunkering down at home. Some folks didn't have that option.
Right.
Or their options were very limited if they had some access to that. What does your work look like during these last 2 years, and what do you take from this experience moving forward with your activism?
Thank you. The Philadelphia Rent Control Coalition was formed in 2018, founded by the members of the Philadelphia Tenants Union and other grassroots and stakeholder organizations working for tenants' rights. In March of 2019, almost a year to the date that the Rent Control Coalition was formed, just as we were preparing to launch the campaign with a joint press conference with City Council member Kendra Brooks, the day after we finally put all those plans together and were ready to launch, Mayor Kenny shut the city down. We ended up pretty much circling the wagons, taking a lead from organizations that members of the coalition work for on how to make this work. Certainly others in the coalition who are much more tech savvy than I kind of got us Zoomified and ready to go. Don't let me touch your technical equipment. It will never work again. And so I just pretty much have somebody tell me what to hit, just so I don't close down Zoom meetings instead of opening them up.
Right.
Because of the prior listening sessions that we had held with tenants, trying to collect tenant stories so that we could highlight them in our work, we were able to continue with them. Many of whom did have computers, or because you can access almost anything with your phone, we were able to continue to work with them. What has proven the most difficult during these 2 years because of the lockdown has been being unable to get physically to City Council, to City Hall. It's much easier to hold a council member's feet to the fire if you can show up in their office and make them deal with you. We have recently experienced, I'm calling it a shutout by council members who are on the housing committee, who we need to present and sponsor the good cause bill that we've been working on.
What do you mean by shutout?
Just they stopped responding to us. We had meetings set up. We met with the housing committee twice. After we presented just one of our good cause proposals, that because the city is in the throes of gentrification and so many landlords are selling their properties because, I mean, now you can get 3-4 times the amount of what your property is worth. Many more tenants were being displaced. So we built into the bill the desire to have property owners, landlords who were selling their buildings, assist the tenant with moving expenses. I can tell you that 2 blocks from me, and I live in the heart of the hood, houses are going for $400,000. If I can sell a house for $400,000, certainly I can contribute some of that to the moving expenses of tenants who are not able to put that kind of money together in a matter of 30, 60, even 90 days.
Yeah.
Most of the tenants that we represent are people who have who are of low income. The most affected individuals in the city are women and children of color. Folks are being pushed out of their neighborhoods without any place to go. So for us, that's been the major challenge, trying to get those things taken.
Would you talk a little bit about what rent control is? What does that look like for folk? You know, I spent some time growing up in New York and I have an understanding of what it is
Yes.
there, but what is it in your view?
In the simplest explanation I can give you is that what rent control looks like is putting a cap on rents so that people are not priced out of their rental properties. I guess the way to look at it and see it most clearly would be in that example that I gave of a property that sells for $400,000, or even on this block that I live on, which has more I call them abandonments than it does actually occupied homes. If the owner sells his property, the tenant has to move, and once it's refurbished, given some aesthetic appeal, when that tenant tries to possibly come back and rent, or someone else with the same income status as that tenant tries to rent, they simply can't afford it. And that's what's happening in the city now. It's closing down to tenants who are the most marginalized. I listened to Cheri talk, and I'm surprised we have never met. We are going to meet and sit down because it sounds like we're doing some of the same work. It's just reminded of so many families. I've been working with a mother of 3 for almost 2 years who had a housing voucher and had been homeless for 1.5 years until she finally found a place for she and her children about 3 weeks ago. And that housing voucher proved useless. She was able to do it because even as her family was homeless, meaning that her children were placed with other individuals, she was able to work double and triple shifts so that she could save money and be able to move. She was someone who we did a GoFundMe page for and raised $11,000. But because she couldn't find any place to live, that money went to an extended stay hotel, which can range anywhere from $600 to $900 a week. Yeah. So it sucked that money up. And as I said, it took her 1 year to be able to find a home for she and her children. And the situation was anything but pretty. And her children have been traumatized by that. And they're not the only ones. Her situation is not that uncommon.
And we'll hope. I look forward to seeing what happens with the work for rent control, because I know that for a long time, many communities in New York were able to maintain as communities because rent control didn't force families out early. And, with gentrification being something that's come up as each of you has spoken, it's one of the things that's going on in so many communities around Philadelphia, that's happening, I should say. How, it comes in kind of gentrification, you feel like a train coming in, and either run you over or bring some things that you might benefit from, depending on your perspective. How do communities, and this is kind of open, how do communities maintain their strength, connection in the face of gentrification? And then the other part is going to be about what ways people can pull some positive things out of gentrification that's happening. It's a train that they can't stop. It's already here. So, but initially, how do communities maintain strength and connection in the midst of gentrification?
It's very difficult. For those communities where there are block committees, it happens a little, I guess they're able to hold together a little easier because they already have those relationships. But in communities where the people who have been there the longest are seniors, or even beyond seniors, elderly, and on a fixed income, what holds them together, I guess, is the fact that many are in multi-generational houses. Many are living on my block in houses that were first purchased by their parents or their grandparents, and have been able to hold it together, in part because not a whole lot of folks want to live on this block, but also knowing that, seeing the gentrification around them, they gotten to feel and to understand that it's over there now, but it's coming here next. So they are prepared to move forward. One of the things that has worked most effectively is us being able to get tenants' stories and get them to come to city council and to tell their stories. And really, like I said, to hold council's feet to the fire. Those communities are able to hold together. But I don't, unless some serious changes are made, I don't hold out a lot of hope that they'll be able to do it for much longer.
Are there any ways that people can try to manage the way gentrification happens in their communities and the way it impacts them? Are there things that they can do to try to help drive that train? And this is open to anybody. Cheri, I see you. Yes.
I can't not jump in.
Yeah.
That's the double negative I like. I can't not. Yes.
I can't not.
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like I live on the moon or something like that. If you look at cultural displacement in Philadelphia, you can go back to Du Bois and his efforts to map out what they now call Templetown, and just the absolute destruction of people's culture, long-term residents living somewhere at a time when families like my son's father lived here, tried to get housing for and help with his addiction, 18 years on and off, very poor services. And when more people are dying as a result of the opiate crisis every year than Vietnam, and at the same time on Kensington, on Lehigh and Frankfurt, you have rapid numbers of housing going up, housing units at a rate of 250,000 per unit.
Mm-hmm.
Something is really, really wrong with that picture. And so we think that something as basic as staying alive and feeding, clothing, and housing our families shouldn't be up for negotiations. And so we're trying to continue to take a page from history and, You know, we have a group of cartographers that have mapped out Philadelphia. They mapped out the country. And in Philadelphia, for every homeless person, there's 10 abandoned properties. This is not a question of scarcity. This is a question of misplaced priorities and greed. And I think that, you know, Reverend Adan has always played an important role lifting up the moral aspect of all of this. And we need to continue to do that because this is not a question of, you know, God bless some of the other folks that have much more patience than me. But this is something that we're really promoting, the reclaiming or the taking back, something as basic as housing our families, especially through this whole COVID process where people would have literally died if they hadn't taken these abandoned properties. Because they would have been forced into situations where they were with other people, could have died from COVID, could have died outside because of the elements, you name it. And then, you know, we know the rate at which, the quickness at which city council and our other elected officials are moving on this. You could hear crickets. And there's a reason for that. This has nothing to do with, you know, them being good or bad people or what political party. You know, nowadays I'm like, you know, what's your name and where do you get your money? And then I can pretty much tell you your position in regards, you know, because if you're getting money from some of the biggest developers and speculators, I don't care how progressive your rhetoric is, you're going to continue to culturally displace and destroy people's right to the basic necessities of life.
So how, if no one else wanted to jump in on that, I have another question to share.
Well, I just, you know.
Yes, go ahead, Adan.
It's just outraging to hear, like, you know, what Cheri said, and then what my sister said about council's committee on housing, like shutting them out. I mean, that sounds criminal. That sounds like that committee, whoever's on it, and hopefully my councilwoman isn't on it, but whoever is doing that, they should not be in office. That just sounds illegal, criminal. That sounds thuggish. That sounds like something that's happening in you know, Russia. So, you know, Cheri and everybody here I'm on the same page with you in terms of policy. It comes down to policy. It comes down to who shapes it, who influences it, who is benefiting from it, you know, financially. And it's just, I'm still just blown away that your group advocates are being shut out from doing what democracy calls us to do, which is, you know, holding our elected officials accountable. To answer your question is, what do we do in gentrifying areas is like the struggle. It's hard. It's hard because, you know, a lot of folks, like in the video that we saw from the North Square, the roots of the community, is you had these doñas, these seniors that cleaned the neighborhood, that made it safe for others to come. And then the others that come at times call themselves pioneers, or they're the new, you know, the great white hope that are here to save us savages. And yet, you know, like what we do here is we educate the newcomers and we say, okay, welcome to the neighborhood. You're here. All right, here's a little bit about our history. And no, you're not going to come and you know, we redesigned our park and someone moved here and all of a sudden they wanted to create a bocce court or something, or have a dog park. And we're like, okay, you've been here 6 months. No, we're not doing bocce, right? We're not doing a dog park. The dog park is over there, you know, in Fishtown. All power to them, you know, Northern Liberties. You got your dog parks, but we don't want a dog park, you know. So it's educating them, it's welcoming them and educating them, and reminding them and getting them involved. So whenever I meet a new person that moves into the neighborhood, I tell them, look, okay, you're white, you're young, you're professional. If you really want to be part of the group of the neighborhood, like, don't just go to work, come home, go in your apartment or your house, and do that every day. Like, get involved, help clean the park. When you got all your friends coming over, don't just sit in front of your stoop drinking your craft beer, whatever it is, and your barbecues, and not get involved with anybody. No, take a walk around the neighborhood, meet the kids, because these kids are the ones that are going to be watching your car. These kids are going to be the ones that are going to see someone suspicious in front of your house, and they're the ones that are going to look out for you. So just get to know your neighbors, and about a good number of them do, and a good number of them don't.
Yeah.
And the ones that don't, those are the ones that I have to look out for. The last thing I'll say is, the gentrification piece and policy is the local zoning committees, right? The RCOs. They have limited power, right? They have limited influence on development, but getting involved in that as well. That's key. Getting involved, because as we all know, we all complain once the condos go up, but yet when there's a zoning committee meeting, when there's something happening, we don't show up to those meetings. And when we don't show up to those meetings, then the developers, they love that. They love that. And then when we do show up, we fight about things like parking. We fight about things that aren't important, right? Things that are kind of take away the focus from what's really happening. So those are my 10 cents on your question, Denise.
And I smile while you were talking sometimes, because I lived in Fairmount Francisville for a very long time. When if you might have, there were so few people left on the block that if somebody parked in front of your house, you'd say, why didn't they park in front of their house? But I smile because I remember when the gentrification became pretty clear, and a young white woman we tried to have a meeting in the street to talk about some other building they were trying to put up, and we didn't want it to go up for various reasons. And this new woman said to me in front of a couple of other neighbors, basically, I'm glad I'm here, and if more people move in, then this can become a good neighborhood.
Wow.
Yeah. Fortunately, one of my longtime white neighbors stepped in basically and said, I got this. But and that's because that's the kind of community that you have to work like that. And we got tired, and we've stopped doing that. Beyond me saying to somebody, when you pass 3 feet in front of me and you don't recognize my presence and treat me invisibly, I'm from a culture where that is tantamount to giving me the middle finger. So those are the small things. So I smiled while you were talking because of those kinds of experiences. And I can only imagine, I want to throw this out there, what it must be like for families who are struggling financially in neighborhoods where $400,000 homes are being built, or old homes are being renovated and then sold for $400, and having people who feel like they're hoping you leave too. How can people in communities take a step to make gentrifying neighborhoods safer, to make sure the voices of people are heard and part of the development, the evolution, I should say, of that community?
So I was thinking, the way gentrification kind of impacts our work at Pathways to Housing looks a little bit different, right? So we practice what's called master leasing. So when we house participants in our program, we're the leaseholder on their apartments. And so a big chunk of our work is recruiting landlords who are willing to work with us, recruiting landlords who are willing to buy into our mission of helping to end homelessness for folks who are living with substance use disorders and serious persistent mental illness, right? Now that's already a heavy lift as is, and I'll give all the credit to our Director of Housing, John Lambert, who's been with Pathways to Housing PA since the very beginning. Who has built our program from the ground up when we started in 2008 with a team of 70 participants, and now 13 years later, operating 7 clinical teams housing over 550 folks, right? We've got 60, 70 landlords that he's been able to recruit and kind of turn on to our mission, right? But as gentrification starts to impact the communities where we've typically been renting most of our apartments, there's fewer and fewer places to house the folks that really need housing, right? We're talking about the impact of the opioid epidemic, and how do you convince a landlord to work with a housing first program where we're saying there are no requirements for folks to take medication. There are no requirements for folks to stop using in order to earn a house or be deserving of a place to call home. And that can be challenging. I think part of it is helping folks recognize that we're all impacted by folks living with mental illness and by substance use disorders. It's 2022. All of us know and love someone who's affected by mental illness or substance use disorders. And so I think it's kind of parsing apart that idea of we don't want those people over there in our communities. No. These people are already part of our communities. They're part of our friend groups, our family groups, and really recognizing that and trying to help folks buy into the mission of, we believe everyone deserves a safe place to call home.
So we hear that and hear it, and I mean, we hear that said and we hear it explained. How have you been able to get people who hear that said but don't take it in, don't buy in? What do you do to get people from here to here, from the knowing it to believing it?
For us, a lot of the time it's training and it's incentivizing, because not a lot of landlords are going to do things out of the goodness of their heart. Sometimes it takes a little bit of financial incentive, or I mean, I'll say our director of housing is a very charismatic guy. I call him the landlord whisperer. But sometimes, that's not enough, and it's put us on a 6-month lease rather than a year lease. Give us a chance, right? And then offering opportunities for professional development, professional networking, sharing vendors with our landlords. Maybe we're going to pay them $50 more a month in rent than they were asking for initially. We also make sure all of our landlords are trained in how to recognize and respond to an overdose. We keep our landlords stocked with Narcan and naloxone. And we've had landlords come back to us and say, actually, all of that stuff you taught me was really helpful, and it wasn't even for one of your program participants. It's somebody in my family or somebody else in one of my other buildings who's not even connected to a program. And then it really spreads word of mouth. Once one landlord really gets involved in what we're doing, they share that with other people in their network, and that's how we've been able to recruit so many folks.
Thank you for that. I'd love to invite each of you to briefly just talk briefly about what needs to happen next in the area that you're doing work, in the area in which you work. What needs to happen next? I'm going to take the privilege and call on and ask Cheri if she'll start.
Sure. Sure. My quick answer is I think that those of us that are on the right side of history really want to do something about this problem, whether we're directly impacted or we care about the people and what's happening to our neighborhoods. We need to start by mapping the money. We really have to get away from people's beautiful rhetoric or who's even getting play in the media, and really map sit down and map out, our elected officials, the developers, speculators, the faith community, different NGOs, and where that money is going. And I think that in that lays the answer, because I truly believe just with the opiate money coming into the city alone, there's no reason why we can't be addressing all of these issues. We're proceeding from the notion that there's not enough to go around and that there's scarcity. And I think it's time for us to practice the politics of love and to call out where this money really is.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheri. Anyone else?
Sure. The measure, I think for us, the measure of success is and will be with safe and affordable housing for the folks whose images are used, but for whom things move far too slowly. In terms, just for the needs of the Rent Control Coalition, we need the support of the people to come to rallies, to be willing to testify in city council to show up as support when we do have city council hearing, because what they seem to understand is numbers. Numbers represent voters, and voters for them helps them to continue to keep what they have and to gain more. If I can just say very briefly that this spring and summer, there are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are being misplaced by the joint efforts of the Philadelphia Housing Authority, HUD, and the city of Philadelphia, even if it's because they're not doing anything. There are 2 properties in West Philadelphia, the West Park Housing Projects and the townhomes at 40th and Market, where both properties have been sold, and tenants in those properties are being given housing vouchers, but there's no place to use them. There's no place folks can go where the rent is going to be less than what they're paying now. So those 2 properties, when they push people out, for the developers to come in and refurbish and make them available to students in University City area, or young white professionals who are tired of driving from the suburbs to the train station to get to the L downtown. It's going to be an ugly scene. I'm talking primarily single parent headed households with multiple children who will have no place to go. When we pursue these issues with city council, again, we need people from the community to come. What happens in our community ultimately will affect everyone. You can't get from the L stop to your luxury apartment on 52nd Street without walking through the neighborhood. Right now, it may not be safe for me, but in a minute, if we don't make changes, it's not going to be safe for anyone else.
Understood. Thank you very much. And we need to try to make sure that gets some coverage.
Yes, definitely.
We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there anyone else who would like to add to that?
I'll say in our work, we need more advocates for the Housing First model and for harm reduction, right? We know it works. Housing First is an evidence-based practice with 30 years of evidence. Like I said, 85 to 90% housing retention rate after 5 years versus that old traditional model of earn your housing, prove you're ready to live independently. It doesn't work, right? So we need more harm reduction advocates. We need more Housing First advocates. Housing First is not a secret. We're very successful at what we do. We want to share that with other people. We need more people talking about it.
So when you say you need more advocates, you need people from the communities to say, hey, I'm interested in learning what I need to learn to be an advocate. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we need folks who are willing to welcome Housing First programs into their communities and share with other folks, why they're valuable and important.
Thank you. Thank you. Adan, anything?
I think Cheri was onto something there with an actual, tangible kind of starting point. My struggle has always been, just getting people in the same room and hopefully having a common direction, a place to go. And I think what needs to happen next is, imagine just this group here getting together and deciding, okay, let's follow the money. Let's see who's getting what related to housing. I'd be on board with that. And the more people that get together on a common goal, I think that's where there's power. That's where there's enthusiasm and excitement, and it's dangerous, because once you start asking those kind of questions, then that's when you are, like Karen said, that's when you're shut out. But if we're all on the same page on anything, organized people, organized money, that's power. So.
Yeah.
So I would, I'd be on board to doing something like that, like just working together on housing or homelessness or, the heroin crisis, and just being clear, we're going to get together and we're going to start with where's the money going? Who's giving?
So I think you guys should stay on after we wrap this, which I'm about to do, so that you can make that exchange of information and set up that first call or coming together that you're going to have, because that would be wonderful. I pardon my interruption. I want to thank the four of you, Karen, Cheri, Andrew, and Adan, for coming on and sharing your vision, your voice, your work, and your inspiration, which when turned into action really does make change. Thank you for watching A Place We Call Home, Philly Stories panel. You can catch the films that inspired this conversation: Philly Home Movie, Housing as a Road to Healthcare, from the Dell to the L, on PhillyCAM TV on Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. and online at phillycam.org/PhilaStories. You can find more information out about Philadelphia Stories Retrospective and what is being featured on that page as well. Keep up with PhillyCAM, folks, on social media at PhillyCAM, and tune in next month for another live panel discussion. Thank you very much.